Story 1. I am currently cleaning out my house and have a container in my driveway for this purpose. Logically, this means that I can't park in my driveway. In order not to further limit the already scarce parking possibilities for my neighbors who don't have a driveway, I park in such a way that I stand in front of my driveway and only take up a little parking space. So 3 cars fit wonderfully in this spot. Now, however, Mr. Coincidence had a funny day today and sent me a middle-aged lady, typical Karen haircut, hydrogen blonde, draped in a lot of jewelry, and wearing clothes typical of this group. I have lived here for 30 years and know some people and where they live, so I knew their addresses too. In the case of Karen, I only don't know her name. So, I just got out of my car and was on the pavement when the lady literally whistled at me. How could I think of parking in the driveway? That's an impertinence. She then said she would call a towing service right away and that she knows the people who live in this house very well. Fun fact, I live alone in the house. My parents have passed away. Actually, I'm someone who clears things up straight away. But here I thought I'd play along. She called the towing service while I calmly leaned against my car and waited for her to finish the call. When I asked her if she was finished and if I could leave now because I had to go to the bathroom very urgently, she just looked at me quizzically, with huge eyes and her chin raised. I took that as a yes, dug my key out of my pocket, and went to the house whose driveway I was blocking and whose residence I was now also blocking. Door unlocked, door closed, watching Karen in the mirror. The expression on her face was hilarious. Instead of waiting for the tow truck to come and sort it out, she just left. I waited for the towing service, explained everything to the guys, showed them the necessary identification papers, and gave them the lady's address. One of the guys said that the lady had to pay for the service. I guess the bill won't be cheap. Story 2. Around the time that I got my first full-time job and finished college, I decided I was ready to venture out and start dating. I had heard about this amazing app through a few of my coworkers, a little thing called Tinder, so I decided to give it a shot. After about a week on the app, I finally matched with a woman who we will call Talia. Talia lived in a different city than I did, but the day we matched, she said she was visiting a cousin. We messaged through the app, and after verifying she was real through her Facebook and Instagram profiles, we exchanged phone numbers. She said she was employed full-time, had an apartment and her own car, and was somehow still single. We talked for about 2 weeks on the phone, always at night after my shift at work, before we finally had a chance to meet when our schedules matched up. I drove my beat-up 1996 Honda Civic to her town. Spent that Friday night, I forget where we ate that night. And in the morning, we had breakfast at Waffle House. Talia did have her own apartment. However, she lived next door to her grandmother, who I awkwardly had to meet the next morning. I learned from Talia that her car was actually in her grandmother's name and her apartment was in the name of her cousin. She went so far as to show me family portraits with her cousin to talk about her abusive ex, and even shared with me how her laundry room was embarrassingly infested with flies and roaches. We officially changed our social media to dating that day. Keep in mind that this was my first relationship in almost 4 years, so I was excited. The scam. Talia also told me that day that she had been fired from work about a week earlier, but was too embarrassed to tell me. I asked how she had kept up her bills, and she said that her grandma and dad had been helping her. Talia asked if I could help her make her car payment, which was due that weekend. I refused. She then explained that she could get a payday loan, which is banned in our state, and could put it into my checking account. I felt uneasy about it and asked if there was another way she could get the loan. Talia said that she couldn't use her grandma or dad's accounts because they had burned her in the past. I thought it was weird, but she started crying. So I called my bank, where I had an account since high school graduation, and opened a linked checking account. I gave Talia the new checking account number and routing number. Talia contacted a payday loan company in Alabama, and by Sunday morning, she had the funds in my linked checking account. Per our agreement, I gave her the money. Talia promised to repay the loan within 2 weeks. I had my reservations but went back home and back to work Monday. Talia called me on Wednesday and said she had a new job. I asked if she had the payday loan squared away with her first paycheck. She said she did, but I still got charged $47 2 weeks after she set up the loan. I called my bank, called Talia to verify the loan was going through her, and terminated the charge from the payday loan as I was not the signed person. Talia and I agreed to meet on Memorial Day weekend 2 weeks later. She stated that her dad had given her a check for the entire loan amount $2,800 and that she would deposit it into my bank near her. Like a fool, I let her deposit the check right before Memorial Day weekend. 2 weeks later, the payday loan company charged another $47 plus penalty fees and another $47. The $2,800 check bounced. Talia stopped answering her calls and blocked me on everything. I called my bank and informed them that I was a victim of fraud. Within hours, my main checking account, into which my paycheck had gone, my savings account, with $800 saved for a new car, and the new checking account were closed. My best friend from college, we will call him Clark, found Talia had two of every social media account, the one she shared with me and the one on which she had a boyfriend. Her cousin from her family photos was actually her boyfriend since high school. Talia was 22, 23. Her boyfriend, we will call him Jason, was in prison, but from their social media posts, she was visiting him once a month, minimum, and had plans to marry him. I spent days trying to get back my accounts and my money. One of the representatives from my bank, and Clark and my mom, advised that I should press charges for fraud. My bank mailed me a copy of the bounce check for criminal investigation purposes, and it showed Jason's name and not Talia's father's name as the owner of the check. That's when I decided to get revenge. As mentioned before, Talia's apartment had a minor infestation of roaches and flies in her laundry room. While I went through legal agencies to pursue pressing charges of forgery on the check, fraud, etc., I found the name and phone number of Talia's apartment complex. I left a message for the apartment complex management that Talia and her grandmother both had filthy apartments. Within a week, Clark showed me that Talia had posted a request for temporary housing for her and her grandma, since her parents wouldn't let her move in. Talia's payday loan company began calling me, as Talia had given them my phone number instead of hers, and they had not received payment yet. I was still reviewing my legal options at the time. One day, I answered and notified the representative that Talia had fraudulently used my checking account. The representative who called me transferred me to their legal department, who was very interested. It turned out that Talia's grandma and her father owed money to the payday loan company. It wasn't a lot separately, but the payday loan company had enough evidence, with my claim, that Talia was the ringleader using her family's accounts. I turned over my evidence, including Talia's text messages promising to pay, the copy of the bounce check, and my bank statements. By the end of the year, Talia was arrested on several charges. Her grandma and father were also arrested, but took pleas for lesser charges in exchange for turning over evidence on her. I didn't have to testify at the trial, but I kept informed. Talia's grandma had had a minor heart attack when she was arrested, and had a more significant one during the trial. I'm not sure if her grandma lived or died after the trial. Despite this, Talia went to prison for multiple counts and will serve more than a decade behind bars. Story 3. About 10 years ago, my wife, then girlfriend, and I decided to move in together. She was sick of living in a dorm, and my lease was up. We had a family friend who was looking for someone to move into a little granny flat under their house. I say under because they lived on a steep hill where the flat was below the house with an entrance on the backside. So we had this incredible view out back, a pool, we'll get to that insane thing, a fire pit, etc. And the rent was in our price range, and the landlord, let's call her Mary, even dropped it $100 if we did some yard work, skimmed the pool, etc. Oh, my parents own a couple of rentals and have my whole life. I've done maintenance for them and even attended a couple of court cases as well with them. This will come into play later. Everything was great for a couple of months. Then Mary and her wife started fighting. Screaming matches, stomping above us, throwing things. I didn't understand how people could be that mad at each other that often and still be together. I eventually sent them an email saying we were not comfortable with the fighting and we wanted to make sure they were okay. They replied to that with, "You're lucky you have a place this nice." Mary began to scrutinize the yard and pool work I was doing, to the point she would insist I vacuum and skim the saltwater pool with no chemicals. Saltwater pools need far less chlorine than regular ones, but they still need some. She wanted me to stop mowing and use a weed whacker, only because the mower was getting old and tired. Really petty things. The last straw was when a driver was shot in a gang shooting across the street. We decided to cut our losses and get out of there. We found a new apartment and a roommate, one of my wife's college friends, that was open a month later, which was perfect for us as we were on month to month on this place. We emailed Mary that we were moving out in 30 days. At that point, she went insane. She tried to do daily inspections of the granny flat, would call and email daily with chores around the property she'd insist we do, and would pound on her floor or ceiling every time she heard so much as a whisper. Daily inspections would require 24 hours notice, which she never gave. Then she tried to bring potential renters over to see the flat. We flat out told her to go away when that happened, with no notice. Finally, 2 weeks before moving out, she had a pest control guy stop by when I was at work and my wife was in class. Our cat was home alone, and we got the notice about spraying pesticide from her in a text about the same time the guy started. So I rushed home after work, stopped by upstairs, and asked for a copy of the pest control receipt. I have massive allergies to most pesticides, so I need to know what was used. She went into her office and brought back a copy with every single chemical on the list checked off, every single one. I immediately took the copy, ran down, grabbed the cat and a handful of clothes, and drove to my parents' house. We stayed there 4 days, hoping everything would clear out in time for us to finish packing and cleaning. The last couple of days before moving out, Mary was out of town, and we were able to get it completely finished a day early. We'd even patched nail holes, painted, and cleaned the carpet. My mom came and helped us get it ready for the next tenants. It was immaculate, and we took photos and videos of everything. When Mary did the checkout with us, we said we weren't comfortable being there without filming, which is legal to do. And she did a short walkthrough before stating it was fine, but that her copier was broken and she'd have to email us the final copy. 2 days later, we got that copy, with $2,400 in damages claimed above our deposit, including a number of charges like my wife had to replace a screw in a cabinet, $1 for screw, $15 labor. I was livid. The place was spotless. My mother, a landlord who does all her own prep work in rentals, helped us, and we'd been very non-confrontational except for filming the walkthrough. I had kept every email, text, and letter from them and started to put together a small claims case. I figured she would already be doing the same. Luckily, I knew my tenant rights and that she'd violated them a lot, including email chains where I'd point out 24-hour notice laws, etc. in emails, and she'd reply to them. Finally, I called the exterminator. The conversation went like this. Hi, you sprayed in my flat without my permission because my landlord ordered it with no notice to me, with my cat inside, and used every chemical on your receipt. We most certainly did not. Here's a copy of the work order. We only put out ant traps on the outside. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for your clarification. Armed with that last little piece, I countersued, asking for a bad faith penalty as well as our deposit. Bad faith was a 3x deposit, so I was asking for a total of 4x what we'd given Mary to move in. The big day came in court. I showed up early, had everything in order and ready, and she swaggered in, huffed up, and was clearly ready to put me in my place. Or so she thought. We sat outside the courtroom for about 20 minutes until a courtroom worker asked the waiting room if anyone would be willing to go to mediation instead since they were booked solid. We both said yes and went into a mediation room with an arbitrator whose job was just to keep us civil and answer any legal questions they could while staying neutral. Mary laid out her case, which took about 4 minutes. The arbitrator still looked very neutral. Then I presented my case, bringing up each violation, each lie, and ended it with a work order from the exterminator, both copies. At this point, the arbitrator looked visibly upset, and I could tell they were just trying to stay neutral. Mary then asked them, "Why is he asking for 4x the deposit?" The arbitrator then explained the bad faith penalty and then looked at me. "Would you be okay dropping the penalty for your deposit back?" "Sure." They looked over at Mary. "I can't tell you what to do. But what I can say is, if you decide to go back into that courtroom in front of a judge, it's not likely to go in your favor." I swear they really said this. I know they're not supposed to, but they did. And boom, I got my deposit back.